Joined now by Adrian Guelke, who's a former professor of politics at Queen's University in Belfast. A remarkable man, and people obviously feel that in South Africa, but you can see the global response tonight.
Indeed, indeed. As it happens, I was in South Africa, in Johannesburg, on the 18th of July this year, which was his birthday, and the outpouring that there was then was quite extraordinary. I mean, the affection for him in South Africa runs across all political lines. So he had a remarkable place in South Africans' hearts, I think.
And you'll have watched the outpouring of, I suppose, grief globally this evening, in the last hour or two since the announcement was made. And that off the back of several months of knowing that the inevitable was coming.
Indeed. Yes, as an example of somebody who promoted reconciliation, he obviously, his behaviour resonated with an awful lot of people, and his self-sacrifice resonated. Not merely that he spent so many years in jail, but even more incredible in a way is that he spent just one term as president of South Africa. He could obviously have gone on to have been president until his death, but he decided, and it was a characteristic of Mandela, that he was a great strategic thinker. He decided that it would be better for the transition if he could have, after only one term of office. And in that way, the argument in politics wouldn't become confused with an argument about the rights and wrongs of the transition.
It's possible, I assume, to overplay his significance in the politics of Northern Ireland, but how important do you think he was here in shaping politicians' approach to reconciliation?
Well, eventually I think he was quite important, but it didn't start out terribly promisingly, I have to say, because early on he gave an interview with Bob Geldof in which he bought into more or less a straightforward anti-colonial view of Northern Ireland. And it was rather odd in a way because he was such an admirer of British political institutions, of Westminster, so that he came out with the idea that it was legitimate for people to struggle for a united Ireland. I mean, shocked many people at the time. But he was also a realistic advocate of negotiation, so that once the peace process really started, after the 94 ceasefires, he was fully on board for helping and assisting the peace process and assisting the negotiations. And the fact that he enjoyed the trust of Sinn Féin was really quite important, because he was always assisting them and helping them towards negotiating a deal and recognising the limits of their position.
And do you think that that was an important influence that he had in moving Republicans away from their support for terror?
Yes, I think so, but he helped members of Sinn Féin who wanted to go that way. I think he helped Sinn Féin leaders who were inclined in that direction in any event. So he was very useful to the leadership of Sinn Féin in persuading the rank and file that this was the way to go, and that they weren't selling out the revolution by going for a negotiated settlement and accepting the inevitable terms of a negotiated settlement.
Lord Trimble there in Martina Purdy's film, also referring to his deep intelligence, his obvious intelligence, and his sense of humour. A sense of humour in politics is never a bad thing.
Yes, indeed, a self-deprecating sense of humour. So he was a person who was very self-aware, and I think had an ability to look outside himself and not take himself too seriously, and not stand on ceremony. And although he could be quite tetchy at times as well. I mean, there were episodes during his presidency when he got quite annoyed with the non-governmental organisation community. And I think if he had stayed on another term as president, his reputation would have suffered. So again, he made a very wise choice in recognising that being outside the political fray, he'd be a greater influence for the good.
And the First Minister, Peter Robinson, has just tweeted that Nelson Mandela's death is a massive loss for South Africa, and he was a true world figure. So there is a unanimity of opinion as far as our politicians are concerned. We've heard from Gerry Adams, we've heard from Martin McGuinness, now Peter Robinson.
It's difficult to think of any other person in the world who would enjoy the degree of support across the political spectrum that Mandela achieved.
And was part of his challenge, do you think, that he put it up to other politicians? Because if he, after 27 years of incarceration, was able to come out and shake hands with his former jailers, effectively, if he could do that, then anybody
could do that.
Could do that.
Absolutely. And one of my enduring memories of Mandela was when he went to a stadium in KwaZulu-Natal and he told the crowd there, this was in the middle of very serious fighting between supporters of the ANC and the Inkatha Freedom Party in KwaZulu-Natal. He said, throw away your knives and guns. And he said so to booing crowds. I mean, he was prepared to take on crowds of people who profoundly disagreed with the sentiments he was expressing. But I mean, he was obviously right that there was nothing to be gained by the violent conflict between the parties in Natal.
Fascinating to hear your thoughts tonight. Adrian, thanks very much indeed for joining us.